Hey guys, welcome to Capturing Christianity. I am Cameron Bertuzzi, and I am here today with Dr. Cy Gart. Welcome to the show. You've been on the channel before, but
I have.
Yeah. So here you're today with us in person, and I'm
Right.
so excited to meet you. Wish I could see your wife, but I'm sure that she's here. She's here in spirit, isn't she?
I miss her too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so today we're talking about your journey from atheism all the way to Christianity.
Right.
And there's a whole lot that's happened in between, back when you were an atheist and now that you're a Christian. We'll talk about all the steps that kind of led there, some of the science that because your background is in, what is it, biochemistry. And so your background as a scientist, but that's actually what led you to embrace God's existence and then eventually to become a Christian.
Right.
So let's start at the very beginning. Tell me about your upbringing. I know we've talked about this on the channel before, but let's kind of go through it a little bit more in some more detail.
Sure. Well, I won't go into too much because, as you said, we have covered it, and it's in my book, so people can find it. But I grew up in a family 3 generations of atheists. They were not only atheists, they were very left-wing. My parents were members of the American Communist Party in the 1930s, which is rare. And so their atheism was very strong, very militant, and that's what I grew up with. I assumed that could not be any such thing as God, or it's not possible for there to be a God. Totally materialistic. My father was a chemist, scientist, so that was the worldview I grew up in. And also the same worldview I had when I went to college, where I started studying chemistry, chip off the old block. And, when you're a chemistry major, you also have to learn some physics. So I was learning things about quantum mechanics and things in physics that seemed a little strange to me, but I didn't really worry about it too much. And then eventually I decided I really wanted to study life. And rather than be a biologist, I wanted to study the chemistry of life. So I went into biochemistry, where I got my PhD. And what happened was that even in college, as a young man, I began to feel there was something missing in my life. And I later realized it was some sense of spirituality, which I think is very important for all people. But I found that, whatever that you want to call that, in science at first. I was thinking, well, the science is great because it gives you a real sense of purpose, a real sense of doing something good in the world, and it's true, so it's great. But there was one catch, which was that what I was learning in science didn't jive with the materialistic worldview. And I couldn't have said it that way. I just felt it. For example, in graduate school, I learned about the process by which proteins are made in cells. And that's a very complex process that involves a tremendous amount of biomolecules interacting with each other, and the complexity is just incredible. And I remember feeling like a chill going down my spine. It was like, this is amazing. How did this get here? And it was something that I couldn't answer. Later, of course, like most biologists, I just came up with the answer, which is evolution. Evolution does everything. But when at that time, I kind of left things as it was and as they were, and I just started wondering about really whether science was really the only way to find any truth. And I pretty soon I rejected that, as many people have. I was not yet ready to believe in God, and that took a lot of other steps. It required me to kind of break down my resistance to the idea, which I was born with. And it's kind of hard to, reject all of that. But eventually I did. And then...
were there any external factors that were helping to open you up?
Yes.
To God?
Absolutely. I was brought to a church by a friend.
And this was still when you were an atheist?
Oh, yeah. And I was, maybe by then I was a little agnostic. Okay. I wasn't really sure.
So you got to the point of agnostic
Yeah.
all on your own.
That was all on my own, and that was due to the science I was learning. Because the science I was learning did not support a strict atheism. It did not support strict materialism.
Okay.
And that comes from quantum theory, and it comes from, the observer effect and all sorts of things in physics, but it also came from what I was learning in biochemistry and about how life works.
Right.
It just seemed that saying evolution explains everything in life was too glib. It was too easy. It didn't seem to me to be enough.
That's interesting because I've heard a lot of scientists, even like Peter Atkins, will say that God is like a lazy explanation. And you're saying that evolution is kind of like a lazy explanation.
Well, at that time, I would have said God was a lazy explanation too. I had no idea what the explanation was. I didn't really know what God was. I didn't understand very much about God. But yeah, I think evolution can explain a lot. But there are some key things that it cannot explain, and that includes the origin of life. And that's not my view. Darwin said the same thing. Richard Dawkins has said the same thing.
Yeah.
The process of evolution that we call Darwinian evolution or biological evolution doesn't deal with the origin of life at all. So, and I'll get into that a little more, I think. But the external factors that helped me were, as I said, going to a church for the first time and seeing something that I absolutely didn't expect. I thought that when you walked into a church, the first thing that would happen is the priest or the pastor would start yelling at you, telling you that you're sinful and, you're going to go to hell.
Where did you get that impression from?
Well, that's the impression I got growing up, that...
From who, though? Who did... Well, maybe it was a different time, but...
It was a different time, but it was also, by the way, it's not over yet. I mean, you'll still find atheists talking about, the horrors of Christianity and how people are doing nothing but casting you into hell all the time and lakes of fire and sin and I felt very nervous and it was.
And your experience was nothing like that?
No, it was a Catholic church run by Franciscans, and the priest gave a sermon about love. Love, period. Not love God, but just love each other, love. And I thought, boy, this is very mild. Why, I think I've been lied to. So at that point, I looked into this a little more. I wasn't a theist yet, but I started looking at the Bible for the first time. The Old Testament left me a little cold. I couldn't really get into it, didn't understand it much. But I read the book of Matthew and I read the book of Acts, and I found those very moving. The book of Acts struck me as actual history. I was sure that this was not something anyone made up. It just didn't fit. So that got me thinking, and then I learned more and more. And as I talk about in my book, I'm not going to go into detail now, I had several experiences, including some dreams and a waking experience that I had to attribute to the Holy Spirit. And at that point, after many years, by the way, I'm compressing 2 decades into this discussion. But at that point, I realized that Christianity is true, and Christ was real, and he lived and died and rose. And I became a Christian.
Yeah, I want to focus in on one part of your story, but I also want to make a kind of general comment about so sometimes I see atheists say like, okay, now it's just like this one, that is the reason why he became a Christian, and that usually they pinpoint some like bad thing that happened, or this is a bad reason to become a Christian or whatever. Right. But in your case, and I think in a lot of cases, probably the vast majority of cases, that it's a multiplicity of different things that all together, built up and built up over many years. You said you're compressing in a story into 5 minutes, something that happened to you over the course of 20 years.
Right.
And so obviously you're leaving things out, and you can't actually get the sense of like all of these things building up and leading to this huge paradigm shift in your thinking and your worldview. Yeah. But that's just the point that I wanted to make, is that there's a whole lot of things going on in your story. Yeah. And they all work together. Like it started out, from atheism to agnosticism,
Right.
based purely on the science. And then you had these other experiences, and everything kind of played together to lead you to Christ. So that's one point I want to make. And then the second point was to bring us back to focus on one area that really got you considering leaving atheism.
Right.
And I understand, is it abiogenesis? That's one of the main things.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that. How did that, looking into that, really bring you more toward Christianity, toward theism?
Well, it's interesting because abiogenesis is a very active field of research, and people are looking at it very intensely in various ways. I've done a little bit myself. But
have you published?
Yes, I have
Okay.
one paper published and one that's just about to be approved, both on the same subject, which I'll get to in a second. But as I mentioned, abiogenesis, nobody thinks that it has anything to do with, standard evolution. The general idea among scientists, anyway, and the atheist ideas who are not scientists are not worth discussing, but the general scientific idea is that life began through what's called chemical evolution. And chemical evolution is very different from biological evolution because there's no natural selection. And there's no replication.
There's no mutations.
Yeah, what chemical evolution is when you take chemicals, you put them together, and they either react or they somehow are able to do things only on the basis of chemistry, without any mutation, without any replication, and without any natural selection. And that's pretty hard to do. Jim Tour, who's in this neighborhood, has often said quite strongly and correctly that people who say that we've solved so many problems in abiogenesis, we're almost there, are just wrong. He says it a little more strongly than I do.
I was listening to something with him the other day.
But he's correct.
He's so forceful.
Yeah, he's forceful, but he's right. And I know why he gets frustrated sometimes, because he is a chemist, a very good chemist, and he knows more than anyone that that's not how chemistry works. Chemistry, doesn't do things for any reason. Life does things because of natural selection, perhaps, or because of, the way life works, and you can get evolution, but you can't get it started. And I started thinking about this years ago, especially related to one of my interests, which is, how the DNA works by coding the existence of proteins which cause life. And, Stephen Meyer has written about this in Signature of the Cell, and he in his recent book, The Return of the God Hypothesis, he talks a little bit about it as well. But I was focusing on one specific aspect, which is critical to the origin of life, to the origin of evolution, and that is the accuracy of self-replication, because nothing in the universe self-replicates accurately other than living cells. No chemical self-replicates, no machine self-replicates, crystals don't self-replicate, even DNA doesn't self-replicate. But a living cell can make copies of itself that are 99.9999% accurate. That's astonishing. How does that happen? It involves a tremendous number of really complex things, including the genetic code, including ribosomes and DNA replication and protein synthesis, things that are just too complicated to describe without slides.
Or without a semester of...
Without a semester of biology, yeah, or chemistry or whatever. So if you have to have self-replication in order to have evolution, how do you get all this? How did that self-replication get there?
Yeah.
It couldn't have evolved because there's no evolution. And that's what I've been studying and what I published on recently. The fact that, in fact, as I assumed, using various models that I'm not going to get into, that there are thresholds And if you don't start out with a cell that already is pretty good at accurate self-replication, you can't do it. You'll never get living cells, and you'll never get evolution going. And as I say, that's been published in a theoretical journal.
Okay. So you've got to get the cell first in order to get it up and going
To get a cell.
and get any
Right.
evolution. But then to get to that point, to get to the first cell, you need just too many things? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, you need too many things that are too difficult to explain through only chemical evolution. So what
is the current like consensus? Is that what's the current scientific consensus about abiogenesis?
It depends who you talk to. If you talk to people who are not working in the field, many of them will say, "Oh yeah, we're getting there. We've got made a lot of progress. We know that amino acids, were in meteors, so they probably, developed or formed in the primeval Earth. We know that nucleotides can make long polymers with RNA. Yeah, that's all true. But the people who are actually the leaders in this field, know the details, and the details are exactly what Jim Tour says. It doesn't happen. You don't get long polymers, you get short polymers. You don't get self-replication, you get annealing, you get junk rather than good stuff. That's what they know. And frankly, I think many of them are getting discouraged. It looks like not a lot of progress has been made. In fact, very little. And the numbers of problems just keep expanding. So,
so the alternative that you arrived at was what?
Well, so I didn't know what I thought there's something missing, and this was how this affected my journey to faith was that it helped break down this absolute certainty that everything is explainable by materialistic science.
Okay.
But I didn't know what the answer was.
Right.
Once I became a believer and I started thinking, well, God is the creator of the universe, but I also said, not just the universe, he's also the creator of life and the creator of human beings, all of which are not explainable by any other means. So, but how? See, that's my question, because knowing that God did something to me is not enough. I want to know a little more details. I don't know if anyone can ever learn that or understand that, because we don't know how God works, obviously. But I want to keep looking at it, and I want to keep, investigating various hypotheses. I don't think we should stop doing scientific research on the issue, but I think we need to be open, and it may be that biology is at the same place that physics was before Einstein came up with relativity. They were kind of stuck. They had solved everything except this nasty thing called light, which nobody could understand. And when Einstein solved light through relativity, it changed physics forever. And it turned out physics was nowhere near complete. And now we're in a position where, we have a huge amount of more knowledge, which makes the physical picture of the universe totally different than we originally thought. And I think biology is in exactly the same place right now. We need to expand our tools. We need to include new concepts into our studies of biology. And I'm not only the only one saying this, there are even some non-theists who are saying this. And one of those concepts may be teleology, purpose. Perhaps we need to put purpose back into scientific equations, which has been taken out of ever since Darwin. The whole idea of evolution is it's blind, right? The blind watchmaker. It has no direction, no purpose. Well, the direction we know is wrong. Simon Conway Morris has shown that there is a direction in evolution through his amazing studies on the Burgess Shale and other things. He has shown that there are constraints. Evolution doesn't do just anything. It does only certain things, and it does it over and over and over again. So there's a direction. There are laws that seem to govern what actually can happen. It's not all random chance. We need to find out what those laws are, and we need to find out what they're about. and here's where I think philosophy becomes very important. Because scientists are not good at figuring out what, what is the basis of science. Once they make a discovery and they find the law, fine, they can then write an equation and have it as a law. But oftentimes, it takes some thought and some new approaches. I mean, Einstein had to use a whole different mathematical approach to get where he got. I think we're going to need to do the same thing. And I think that what we will find is that those new approaches, including something like teleology, are going to point even more than they do now to a divine being, a divine designer.
So I want to kind of get an overview of your journey. So you encountered these different things in science, and let's just get a quick summary of those. So abiogenesis, quantum mechanics, was there anything else that really stuck out?
Well, the fine-tuning argument.
Fine-tuning argument, okay.
Really, I learned about that later, but yes, that was definitely another
So those
piece.
were some of the science. Was there anything else scientifically that?
Well, there's actually a lot of other things there. Some of them are not very well known, but just the idea that there's a lot in physics that is not known and is very surprising, and physicists themselves, some of them, are getting a little nervous because it looks like the CERN, for example, the CERN collider has not given the results that people were hoping for. A lot of theories have been thrown out. I can't go into details because I'm not a physicist, and this is just from what I'm reading. So, and there are other parts of biology that are incredibly suggestive of something way beyond anything we can understand, including consciousness, including human behavior. I mean, the idea that evolution, Darwinian evolution by natural selection, explains why we have morality, or explains why we're creative, or we love music. That's just nonsense. That's not even scientific. Those are stories. Okay. So what makes us human? What does it mean to be in the image of God? Well, we have a sense, right? Everybody has a sense that human beings are not just animals who are smart. Some people deny that, and I have never, even as an atheist, I never went along with that view. I always knew that human beings were somehow special, very special. I didn't know why, I didn't know where it came from, but now I think I do.
So then that was kind of a summary of the science that kind of led you toward theism. But then what was like, I know you mentioned like there were several different experiences that you had at church and dreams and everything. What was one that really stuck out to you that really contributed to your eventual accepting Christianity as true?
Well, I can tell you about one of the dreams, which there were two main ones that I believe involved intercession from the Spirit.
Were you, at this time, like really investigating? Okay. Were you reading scripture a lot? Were you praying at all?
The first one, I wasn't even thinking about Christianity or belief. I was an agnostic. I didn't know what was going on.
Okay.
And I didn't understand the dream at all when I had it. And it was a very frightening dream because I don't like heights. And I was hanging from the edge of a cliff, terrified. I didn't know what to do. And I couldn't climb up. I was holding on with my hands. And I screamed out, "Help, help." I didn't know who I was calling to. I just said, "Help, help." And I heard a voice say, "Just let go." And I said, What? I fall down. And the voice said, "Just let go." So I finally said, well, okay. So I let go. And the moment I let go, the entire landscape turned 90 degrees. And instead of hanging from a cliff, I was lying on the ground. And there was a man whose voice I had heard standing there. That was the man who said, "Just let go." I woke up and I was like, whoa, what was that? I didn't know what he meant by "just let go." I didn't know who it was. And then eventually, of course, I found out that, of course, the man was Jesus Christ, and what I had to let go of was all the baggage that was in my life that was preventing me, absolutely blocking me from even considering the idea of a God. And eventually I did let go of all of that.
Wow, that's crazy. Was there another one? You mentioned
the other one
that
was
a little bit
later, and the other one was I was already thinking about maybe believing in something. I don't remember exactly where I was, but what I do know is I had never been to a church yet, other than that one Catholic church. I might have been there already, but I had never.
What were they wearing? The Franciscans? Were they like
brown robes? Yeah,
yeah.
That freaked me out a little
Wasn't
bit.
that cool though? It was kind of
cool. It was cool. They were very cool people. They were really nice.
Like the little rope.
Yeah, little rope. Yeah, I thought that was weird.
Did they like shave their heads?
I don't remember that. They might have. Yeah, I don't remember.
Catholics, man, Catholics.
Yeah, well.
So
that's another story.
Yeah. So tell me about the experience.
So I had not yet read the gospel. That's definite. So I had a dream that I was walking around the garden trying to get in, a walled garden. And I couldn't get in. It was very steep walls, and I kept trying to climb up, and I found vines and little things, but I couldn't get to the top. And I got really frustrated, and I kept going around. And then I saw a man, and he said, "What's the matter with you?" And I said, I want to get in, and I can't climb over. He said, "Well, then use the door. There it is." So I walked in, opened the door, and walked in, and there was the garden. And later, when I was in church, I think the first time I went to the church I'm now a member of, there was a picture of Jesus knocking on the door. But I had never heard that knock on the door, and if you knock, it will be open for you. That was, I had yet to read that, but I dreamed it. So that had a big effect on me, as you can see.
Yeah, I'm like about to start tearing up myself. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot more for us to cover in this short interview, but is there anything that you'd like to leave with the audience before we close it out?
Yeah, I think I have one main message. I think I was called, as so many of us are called, to give one message to people who are questioning their faith, especially if they're questioning it because of science. And that's the reason I wrote my book. It's the reason I'm writing, articles. Science and Christian faith are absolutely not in conflict. I understand that people growing up in faith occasionally will lose it for various reasons. But one of those reasons should never be science, okay? Because science is not anti-Christian. Science is not atheistic. Christianity was instrumental in the foundation of science, in the beginning of science. All the original scientists were Christians, and that remains. There's still many, many scientists who are Christians, despite the current atmosphere, which is somewhat hostile to Christianity. But my prediction is, what I see now happening is that atheists are beginning to deny the reality of science. You find atheists saying, no, the universe didn't have a beginning, it's been there forever. No. They say the DNA is not a code, there's no genetic code, it's not a real code. Wrong. And the reason, these are not scientists necessarily, but they're atheists who think they are seeing this from various people. And the reason they're attacking scientific facts, because they are, is because the scientific facts are pointing more and more to what they don't want to accept, which is that this world has a creator. And everything we see is part of the creation, including ourselves. So if you are being told that you have to choose between science and your Christian faith, reject that. Whoever told you that is wrong. It's not true. What's true is Christianity.